Great, thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Mathis. All right, so I'm going to go first and talk with you about writing workshop. And as Dr. Mathis said, I'm a kindergarten teacher, and in pre-K and in kindergarten, I've gotten used to the writing styles of our children and also the process in which we're teaching writing. And really, those steps that kind of build that foundation for writing. So in kindergarten, why are we using writing workshop whereas in pre-K we didn't? Well, there are some similarities. The goal is to get children just writing about what they're interested in and what they're passionate about. And so in pre-K, it's much less structured to it. It's a picture and kind of developing either labels or words that go along with it, but more or less sitting down and working on a project. And in kindergarten, we take it to that next step, and we start trying to talk about what that picture is and what story it tells, and then developing into, okay, now let's have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and kind of actually work through a story. But why Writer's Workshop here is because it's a process that we feel gives the children a chance to be in charge of their own writing. It's their stories. It's not what we're structuring to them. It's what they want to write about, and just kind of giving them guidelines throughout there. As a teacher, through that, we are more of a facilitator and kind of a mentor to them so that we can help guide them through the process. Something that, when we're doing this, is very important through the writing workshop process is being able to observe the children in their independent writing so that you can focus on what needs that they might have instead of giving everybody the same skill and just trying to focus on that. You can give them that independence, and then you can go, okay, this child needs to work on this. Let's form a small group so that we can start working on these skills. I think that writing workshop is important because it also works on the art of communication. Writing is essentially expressing yourself and gives you more opportunities to share. If you say, for us at the beginning of the year, one of the hardest things to do when we start off with it is think of a small moment, something that's very important to you. And for some, it's kind of hard to share. It's, going to the park. Okay, what happened at the park? I played with my friends. Okay, you played with your friends. What did you do with your friends? We went down the slide. How did you feel when you went down the slide? I was really scared. You had a really strong feeling about what you were doing. That is important to you. And then they start feeling like, oh yeah, I was able to get all that out, but really all they're going to tell us at first is I went to the park. So trying to get that story out. And why Writer's Workshop? It's because they get to take chances, they get to explore, and then we help them create these things, revise these things, edit them, and eventually become a real published author in our classroom. They're not making any money, unfortunately, but it's the first step towards it, right? So I thought with this, why Writing Workshop, some questions that might be asked. What skills are my child gaining? Really, through this process, you can see where I said you get to observe them and see where they're at. Maybe they're just learning to draw some of the shapes and think about what pictures actually look like. Maybe it's labeling with one letter, the first sound. Maybe it's writing a word. Then maybe it's writing sight words that they see in a sentence through there. And it's important that this process and reading workshop kind of work together because they both cyclically follow up on skills like that, sight words and writing sight words through there. Yeah. So that's that one. That's that slide. So what is writing workshop, at least in kindergarten, and pretty much what is writing workshop as a whole? There is a delightful pie graph there that talks about a mini lesson. And a mini lesson is a central focus with the whole class on what skill you might be working on. And maybe it's starting to add labels. Maybe it's thinking about what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. Maybe it's about just thinking of an idea. That mini lesson is important because it gives them a chance to start thinking and will drive what they're going to be doing when they work into the next part, which is the work time and conferences. And that's independent writing. That's your child working by themselves, getting through their thoughts, trying to figure out what they want to write about, working through problems if they feel stuck, what tools that they need to do on their own to continue writing. Because it's important during this time for us to observe and to get into small groups so that we can conference with them, individualize those skills that maybe they need, and be able to observe the children. I think this also, the work time, helps kind of push that I don't know what to do, and just kind of sitting there and looking for a teacher for help, which everybody wants to do that, but then going, I can't ask for help. I need to figure this out on my own. And that's really our job, to give them those tools so that they can do that. And then at the end of writing time, we like to share or kind of bring everything back together. You know, this is what we worked on, or everyone sit down and share. What's something that you did today? It's really a good process for them to reflect upon the whole experience. In kindergarten, we do, I have up there small moments, pattern books, and how-to books and opinions. These are all different forms of writing that'll get them seeing different ways that they can become a writer. You know, maybe the pattern book is good as, I haven't done it yet, unfortunately, but it seems like it's a good starter as to, here we went to the park, we wrote on a slide, the next page, we used the tricycles, and so on. It kind of goes through something that's repeating in a pattern. And how does it look like during this process, during the writing process? So students are writing and working the whole time. After the mini lesson, they are engaged in their writing. They apply learning from the mini lesson, and hopefully they're going through revising and editing. No matter how many times you say, go back through your work, look at it, touch each word. Did you add these? Did you, whatever you've done? Yes, I've done that. And then as soon as you sit in that small conference, then you know that they haven't worked on it. But it's the goal to be constantly working on your writing. Usually sounds, depending on who's teaching it, it sounds quiet. You hear pencils moving. Maybe you hear music. Maybe you hear teachers conferencing with other students. And that's also a good chance for the ones who are working independently to overhear ideas and strategies. Really, this is a good opportunity to find something that somebody's working on and hold it up to the class and say, hey, everybody, I noticed that so-and-so did this, and I think that it was really effective to tell their story. So that's what it usually sounds like. And in my groups, and hopefully for them, they don't feel like they're anxious. They feel calm. They're excited to write. As I have up there, in the zone. Because I thought when you feel like you're really successful, you're really having fun at something, and you're good at it, what do you feel like? And the kids came up with that. They feel in the zone. So I have it there. This last slide is as what we do in class. What can you do at home? Because these writers, we want to love writing at school and continue this at home. Telling stories is always a great way to do it, and having them look at books. Encouraging reading. Like this, if something funny happens, it's easy to laugh at, or maybe we take a picture at it, but hey, can you draw me a picture of what happened there? Because maybe they'll see something that you didn't initially hear from them. It's, as I said before, a chance for them to communicate, and so if something funny happens, that's a great way to tell a story. Word games, there's tons of apps and word games online that helps them just recognize sight words, and also allows them the chance to use those words to tell their story. And as a parent or as a guardian, being able to look at what they're writing and the same, reflect upon it. Be positive. You wrote that word? Or, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Can you tell me more or explain this picture? Because if they feel stuck, they don't feel successful, and the goal of Writing Workshop is to give them their writing and have ownership of it and be happy about it and want to continue. So I gave you my perspective of kindergarten Writing Workshop. Now Liz is going to give you a perspective of Reader's Workshop.
Thank you very much. Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Liz Hwang. I'm the 5th grade English language arts teacher here at the junior school, and I also have experience teaching reading and writing workshop in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade as well. So I'm going to give you an overview on what the Readers Workshop looks like. So Readers Workshop is structured very similarly to Writers Workshop, and I'll get to that in a minute, but the big thing that's different for many adults when they're getting used to workshops, especially reading workshop, is that it's a little bit different in that all students are not reading the same text. We're not sharing a book full of the same stories that we're all working through together. A reading workshop is designed to be an authentic reading experience where students are all reading their own books that are at their own level. A lot of work is put into helping students at a very young age find books that are just right for them. So you can go home and you can ask your child, can you tell me which book is just right for you, and how do you know that? It means that they can easily read the majority of words on a page and also understand what those words mean. The reading workshop is designed so that the majority of time in class is spent practicing reading by having students read independently and also write about their reading and discuss their reading with one another. So this looks similar to Nick's model of how the writing workshop is structured. Reading workshop is structured similarly with a mini lesson to begin. And it is called a mini lesson on purpose. It's designed to be a very short lesson. The shorter the better sometimes. Part of the reason behind that is because children, especially young children, have a shorter attention span, and we want to make sure that students are truly engaged in their learning. So when teachers teach a mini lesson, we focus on one small objective. We're not saying, today we're going to learn this book. We're not going to learn all about fiction. We pick one small skill or strategy and focus on that. For example, we're going to learn how to identify this character's feelings based on what the character is thinking, saying, and doing in the book. In that mini lesson, you'll see a teacher doing a few different things. A teacher may have a read aloud book that they're sharing, and while the teacher is reading aloud the book, the teacher is also sharing his or her thoughts about the book, really thinking out loud, showing students, modeling for students what that reading process looks like, how to ask questions as you read, how to notice some of the details that you can connect to be able to form an understanding of the book. Then the students will actually get to try out that strategy while still in this little safety net of the mini lesson, while the teacher is right there working with the whole group. Students will be able to work together. Thank you. Thank you. Students will be able to work together to try out that strategy before going into the independent reading time. So often we say, I do, the teacher is modeling, we do. We try as a class together before you do. Now it's the student's turn to try out that skill or strategy independently during this independent reading time, which is the majority of that reading class time. That's the time when students practice independently, they read, they immerse themselves in a book. Sometimes we say you're reading that book like it's gold, it's treasure there in front of you. They're practicing that skill we just learned, as well as all the other skills and strategies we've learned so far. During that independent reading time, they may also be writing about their reading, because writing about reading is very important and helps students grow as readers. They may be jotting post-it notes with their own thoughts, feelings, reactions, questions about their books. They may be writing longer summaries of it. They will have a chance to share during closing. During that independent reading time, that, just like the writing workshop, that is the time that teachers will be able to differentiate their instruction by working one-on-one with students or with small groups of students. If a teacher notices that there's maybe a group of 4 or 5 students who all need a little bit of extra practice with fluency, reading aloud, with expression as they read, to show the meaning behind a text. That is the time, this independent reading time, that a teacher will pull a small group of students to work on that skill. It's also the time when a teacher will get to know a student better as an individual reader by conferencing with him or her and finding out that student's strengths and sharing compliments, finding out the areas of growth for that particular student and teaching into those areas of growth by offering additional strategies and setting goals with that student. And then we do wrap up with a closing. That closing could be something like, share how you use this skill today. What did it look like? What was your character feeling today, and how did you know that? In older grades, we use book clubs so that students can share their reading with one another, either with a partner or a small group. So that would be a time when they share their thinking with one another as well during that time. So that's a way that we kind of foster collaborative learning where students can really learn from one another as well as from the teacher. So I do have a short video, about a 5-minute video, to show you of a teacher actually implementing the reading workshop in his class. You'll see a couple aspects of the reading workshop, in this video. You will see a little snippet of the mini lesson where you'll see the teacher introduce a specific skill that they're working on that day. And then you'll also see a little bit of that independent work time where students are reading, and you'll see a teacher pushing into conference with the kids at that time.
Reader's Workshop, the thing that I really love about it, it's what reading really is in its most natural form. It's what we did with our children when they were little. We sat them on our laps and we read to them. The best part about Reading Workshop is that I get to teach every student every single day, and I get to work with them on what they need. The day starts with a mini lesson that I teach that helps kids to focus on a certain aspect of reading. And it's within a bigger unit, for instance, character. Today, we have been talking so much about character traits and feelings and using more exact words to describe it. And it made me think about how to do that, what readers do is they create theories about their characters. Sometimes those theories change. And to show you that, I want to read growing theories about characters and about the story, and then reading to see if that theory is maintained or whether it starts to change. Grandma! I call her. Anna! We meet and hug. She tells me how much I've grown since last week. Somebody grow that much in 1 week? I think the grandmother's joking. Do you think she's joking? I think so too. So already in my mind, I'm growing a theory. I have a theory that the grandmother and the girl are very close. That they have a really close relationship because they're joking around with each other. Along the way, I'll stop it in moments and have them act out emotions and beams all over their face. Show me with your face. What's it mean to beam all over your face? How are you feeling?
Proud.
Proud. Good call. Or I might ask them to turn and talk to a partner about what their theory is right at the moment, or how their theory might be changing right now. I might ask them to turn and talk to a partner about how, if they've ever had an experience like that as well. I'm sick from being nervous. You ever felt that way? Where do you feel it? Point to the spot you feel it. The physical act of acting out emotions helps them to see how authors use figurative language to bring forth the character's feelings. All of those things help them to make physical and mental connections to their actual reading. Thumbs up if you know what to do. So right after I finish the mini lesson, the first thing I'll do is check in to make sure that they know what they're going to do as a reader. And then I'll send them off to their seats to get, I call it buried in a book. It is silent reading, basically. They are reading to themselves, and my job is to go around and confer with them individually and do the real teaching then.
Do you have any theory going so far? About any of the characters? You should. Really, you should know something about them. I think.
Whatever the next lesson is, the real purpose of it is so that I can confer with kids. So that I can really focus in on one kid and give them some kind of skill work or some kind of comprehension work for the day that they need to become a better reader.
Any double letter will always make the vowel shorts. Just look for those double letters. I remember one of the things we were working on was your speed. So I'm going to put my finger on the words, and I want you to try and keep up with my finger. Let's see how fast you can go. Choose that he's exhausted. In that sense, the word in this piece, read. Steven, your screen is slightly high. He must have been exhausted because it didn't hurt anything. What did hurt me? So 75. Now 75 is if you're exhausted. You've been riding for 8 hours. Now 75. See the difference? Yeah. Didn't hurt a bit. Okay. That's the way the author shows you insight. There, keep going.
In that process of conferring from the student that reads at the highest levels and the others below that, every single one of them is getting what they need every single day, and they're getting to practice something important for them to become a better reader.
Slideshow back up for you. So one of the things that I liked about that video is that the conference time showed how each student gets what he or she needs, whether it's extra help with decoding words, actually being able to read them and sound them out, or fluency, being able to read aloud at an appropriate rate, or with comprehension, being able to understand exactly what's going on in the story. So that conference time is the time when teachers continue to teach but are able to differentiate that work. And I also wanted to leave you with some ideas for how to support your students at home as well. Just like we put a lot of emphasis during our school day on reading independently, we definitely want kids to be reading at home as much as possible, really practicing those skills that they worked on during the day, getting to continue those practice time at home. Parents can actually listen to your child, have your child read aloud. That's where you'll get an idea of how your child is progressing with fluency, being able to read aloud, not stumbling over words, but reading at a smooth rate, adding an expression to show that he or she understands the meaning behind the story, using his or her voice to show the character's feelings and what's going on. Access and choice. We want students to have access to books. So Mrs. Gehring works really hard here at our junior school library to make sure that students are being matched with books that are great for them and that they have a whole lot of books to choose from. Teachers work really hard to make sure our classroom libraries are well supplied for students. And at home, you can always go to your local library to make sure that your student has books to read always. Choice is really important. We want students to be choosing books that they are interested in, that they want to read about. Modeling reading is important. Share your reading life with students. Share how and when you read. Maybe you read before bed. Share that with your child. Maybe talk a little bit about what you're reading. Let them see that reading truly is a part of our lives, not just something we do in school. Writing about reading, as I said, is important. When we write about our reading, we think about our reading in a different way. We tend to notice things we might not notice without it, and it's a way to really connect those reading and writing skills so that students can have the practice with both. And finally, praise. Support your child. Everyone's going to be at a different level, but everyone will make growth and progress, and we want to make sure we're celebrating that growth and really making reading something that children want to be doing. And as you saw, one of the goals of Reading Workshop is to become a lifelong reader. So now, Christina Rowan is going to chat a little bit about what these workshops look like in our middle grades.
Let us know if you need any help with that.
Thanks. So as Liz and Dr. Mathis said earlier, my name is Christina Rowan, and it has been a little hard to keep track of me lately. I started here at the junior school in 5th grade teaching math and social studies for 3 years, and then I transitioned into 1st grade last year, and now I'm in 2nd grade. So it's always a little bit of a tracking game, keeping up with me. But that's given me a lot of opportunity to see these two different curriculums of reading and writing workshop in kind of a different light. Even my first year in 5th grade, only being the math and social studies teacher, you know, I was right next door to Lisa Anselmo, who was in Liz's role prior to that, and I've heard from both of them such passion about the subject, which really led to the children feeling the same way. So as the math teacher, I would have students come in to my classroom and say, oh my gosh, Miss Reed, which was my name at the time, let me tell you about this amazing book I'm reading. It's called this, to the point where then I had them writing down book recommendations for me on little Post-its and handing them to me. So I saw kind of firsthand, before I even had my hands on the curriculum to teach it, what it inspired our kiddos to do. The other thing that was kind of nice in this journey is in 1st grade, they are, much like kindergarten, doing writing workshop, but not yet reading workshop. But in 2nd grade, that's when both of them come together. And with this being my first year teaching 2nd grade, I'm just slowly starting to see just how much they're connected. But it's been really exciting to kind of see them transitioning into even stronger readers and writers using both of those curriculums. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about, like Liz said, what the middle looks like. We've heard from 5th grade, we've heard from kindergarten, and kind of that 2nd, 3rd grade level just looks kind of different because they're building on their own skills. So one of the things that I have found so far to be most important was that choice that Liz spoke of earlier as well, of students choosing their own books. I think a lot of the adults that have seen programs like this can notice how different it is. A lot of the curriculums that were there when we were learning to read were everybody had the same book, everybody was reading the same story, everybody had the same 5 vocabulary words, and everybody took the same assessment, and it just looked quite different. So looking at this now, everybody is choosing, or all the students are choosing books that are just right books for them. They have little tests that they can give themselves, and the teachers are a little more hands-off now. We do generally guide them to books that are most appropriate for them in terms of difficulty, but generally they can pick up a book. We've talked about examining the cover, the little blurb on the back, seeing if it interests them, but then opening to a page and doing a 5-finger test, which means that they're taking a look at a random page in the book, reading it to themselves, and kind of keeping track on their fingers as to how many words they might find difficulty with or stumble with. And if they hit 5, they kind of know they're not quite there yet. I know in my classroom this year we're focusing a lot on the word yet. It doesn't mean they're not going to get there, it just means they're not there at this point, and they just have some more growing to do. But that sense of self, of being able to choose a book that interests them as opposed to just the same book that everybody else has a lot more power than I ever would have realized prior to teaching this curriculum. Another piece of that is their Fontes and Pinnell level, which the teacher assesses, and the students, at least in my classroom, are pretty aware of where they are. It's based on the alphabet. So when they're leaving 1st grade, coming into 2nd grade, they're right around a level J. That's where we expect them to be. Now, of course, there's differentiation there. Some kiddos are not quite there yet. Some kiddos are above that level. But that's the nice part about Reader's Workshop. They can work with the teacher wherever they are, and conferencing and mini lessons can be adapted to whatever they feel most comfortable with. But the F&P level is just one piece. Again, their interest in the text is really important. Their background information or background knowledge as to what they've been exposed to so far in their life is pretty important when they're selecting a book. But one other thing I wanted to mention was just there is a document, and my colleague Kristen Lister just shared this with me, and I thought it was so interesting, that kind of details all of the different levels in the Fontes and Pinnell system, again, based on the alphabet. And we'll give you a little bit of a breakdown of what books in the K, L, or M level look like. So just for example, I know it's a little bit hard to see, it's pretty small, but it says in books that are in levels K, L, and M, there's typically one main plot line that is predictable, usually based on a problem-solution pattern, and the problem and conflict is simple and clearly resolved. Characters' personality traits are straightforward, identified directly. The main character's feelings change throughout the story in an obvious way, while his or her personality traits stay the same. And then they'll go on to the next levels of books and kind of show how that changes for a student. So I thought that was interesting just because the level's a piece of that based on the difficulty of the book. One other thing I also really liked about Reader's Workshop in second grade is they're kind of transitioning from learning to read, which was a lot of kindergarten and first grade, and then transitioning to reading to learn. So they're not working as hard usually to decode words. And if they are working on words that they're unsure of, they're usually doing some more word solving, which means they're looking at the meaning of the word, the syntax, and the visual. So looking at a word, they might be reading a paragraph and they might come to a tricky word and say, okay, do I know if, and they might try it and be kind of unsure if it's the correct word that's supposed to be in that sentence. So they might say to themselves, okay, does this make sense? Does it sound right when I read it? And that might require some rereading. And then does it look right? So we prompt them to do that more so when they're reading a book and they stumble a little bit. When I was doing some training this summer for Reading Workshop, and I liked this, the way this was presented. It said, the presenter said that we're looking for a place of productive struggle. And most of us we don't really want that struggle for the kids. We want them to feel confident and good, but that keyword being productive. They're going to stumble on some words, that's natural, and if they're not stumbling on any words, it's probably not that just right book for them. They probably want a little more challenge. So we want a place of productive struggle where they might read a little bit, hit some trouble, notice it, which is good, and then search with, does it make sense? Does it sound right? Does it look right? And then maybe do some self-correction. And then the last part that I wanted to mention about second grade Reader's Workshop is they begin posting or jotting, which based on everything that I saw of the older kids is like a rite of passage. They're fifth graders who walk around with these huge, like really thick, Liz can attest, books that have all of these Post-its in them. They're like all over the place. And for the longest time I was like, what can they possibly be writing in all these Post-its in these books? But they're really a beautiful way for the kids to write down their thought process, what they're noticing in the book, what they're predicting in the book. And I wanted to, that poster's pretty small, so I brought the big version, just in case that helps at all. But in second grade, they're just starting. So they're actually working with symbols more than words. They can add some words to it. So they can add some words to it, but they can kind of just start with the symbols. So if they're wondering something, they can just put a question mark, and then that brings them back to that place in the book where they're potentially trying to figure something out. If they have a connection with something, we have the connection sign that we make in person, where the kiddos will do this if they're connecting with something that a character is experiencing or doing. But they can do the kind of the little arrows there. If they like something, they can put a heart. And I've already noticed with my second graders that they've started putting some words. They've started putting some words along with their symbols because they're becoming more comfortable. So they're doing that throughout the book, and then they can track their thinking. They can pick out their favorite Post-it. They can tell us why it's their favorite. So that's just kind of an exciting thing for them to start in second grade. Okay. So second grade in Writing Workshop. Again, both Nick and Liz did a wonderful job explaining how important writing is to these kids, and Liz was speaking about that connection between reading and writing and how important it is to write about what you're reading. The one thing that I think stood out the most being in first grade and then in second grade is that they're experiencing that first subject of writing a small moment at the beginning of the year kind of across the school. We're all doing it, but it just looks so different at every grade level, and I thought that was really interesting. A small moment in Writing Workshop means that a student is taking an important time in their lives, but then they're zooming in, and that's why there's a picture of the watermelon, because we've talked a lot as teachers about how The watermelon might be the big picture, but when you zoom in a little bit closer, the little seeds are kind of those small moments that kids can connect to and write on and expand on. So to see that in first grade, they're focusing a lot on sentence structure, just kind of getting that general idea out there. But in second grade, they're able to put a lot more into it. They're able to start to use comparisons in their writing. They're able to use quotations, which is always, again, a very grown-up thing for them to use because they see it in the books that they read in. And then they get to kind of start to use more detail as well. They have that sense of self, just like reading workshop. They get to choose what they're writing about. We're not giving them a very specific prompt where everybody has to write about their favorite book or their favorite trip, or they have that ability to choose what speaks the most to them, and I think that makes a big difference in how much they can write and the quality of their writing. We're working on fostering independence, and there's a familiarity there, but extended. So they know that small moments, they know what they are from previous experience, but we know how to extend and push that a little bit further. In second grade this year, we talked a lot about what a meaningful small moment is, as opposed to just maybe a more mundane small moment. And the kids really took hold of that and did their best to find that moment that meant the most to them. In terms of building confidence, I think starting with something familiar at the beginning of the year allows them to hit the ground running, and they're like, oh, I remember how to do that, but then they can add to it and feel better about it and feel more confident about it. But I think the biggest part of it is that they're willing, because of the familiarity, because of the support that they have from reading workshop, they're willing to try new things. They're not just relying solely on what they've known and sticking only to that. They're willing to try new ways of writing. They're willing to take chances in the classroom when they're answering questions. They're just a lot more comfortable in who they are as a writer, and probably because they're a lot more comfortable in who they are as a reader. So they're building on what they know, and they have been pretty happy about it so far. One thing that the class did most recently was we focused a lot on sensory details. So we were actually using our outside spaces when the weather was much nicer than it is today. And they were able to go out to the Japanese garden and take their clipboards and their sheets of notes and just write about all the different textures that they were seeing, all the different colors, all of the different even smells that they had out in the Japanese garden. And they wrote a lot of descriptive words and turned them into sentences. And I did notice as they continued to write that their writing contained a lot more detail, and they realized how much stronger that made their writing. Okay, and the last part that I wanted to share was just a little bit of what we feel is gained through both of these amazing curriculums of Readers and Writers Workshop. And this is just kind of what I've seen with these kiddos at the different grade levels that I've been able to experience thus far. And I always get a little mushy with this part, which I'm well known for anyways. But I think there's a big part of being able to see students being very proud of their work. We see that a lot at Readers Night and Authors Night, where they get to share their love of reading with their parents here at the junior school. And then Authors Night, which is in the spring, they get to share all of their hard work and all of their progress. Their drafts are typically connected to their writing or in the folder, so they can see that progression. But the sense of accomplishment and the pride, I think, are the biggest things that I see gained throughout the process. But they're also very resilient, and they're taking accountability for what they're writing, what they're reading. And then two things that Lucy Calkins in both of these workshops focuses on are independence and stamina. So I think, as Nick mentioned, they have to try and work it out themselves. They're not always running to the teacher because they stumble on a word. They have tools in their toolbox, like we often say, to work through that. And then they feel another sense of pride and accomplishment when they can work through it, kind of without that hand-holding or that help. And then stamina, the kids really like to keep track of how long they're reading or writing. So in a lot of the classrooms, you'll see we read 4 blank minutes today, and their goal is to always increase the amount of time their quality writing is happening, and then how long they've read as well. So in my mind, both curriculums do a fantastic job of teaching to the student where they are and allowing the process of reading and writing at this age in the middle, and I think both of the other levels that you've heard from today. that it's student-centered and allowing them to kind of drive the ship.
Yeah.
So I think we are lined up for questions.
And hopefully answers.
Yeah. I have questions and answers, so we'll see.
Lauren?
I'm just curious, so are they doing the reading and writing workshop together all during one period, or is it broken out separately?
That's a really good question. They do go hand in hand, so that would make sense to try and consider that, but they are doing them separately. So in our classroom, for example, we do reading in the morning, and writing is typically at the end of the day for us, but they both happen every day.
I think it's largely dependent on that teacher's schedule. So in 5th grade, because we are departmentalized, students come see me for our English language arts block, so we always do have reading and writing together during that time.
Yeah, and in kindergarten, it kind of, we fit it into that schedule, but it's not always one after the other. Sometimes we have writer's workshop, and then we'll go through maybe math or go to a special and then have reader's workshop, because we don't have a specific reader's workshop similar to 2nd grade. It's getting those beginning stages of sight words and sounding out words, and more phonics and phonemic awareness.
Oftentimes, kind of what is being learned about in that unit in reading is connected to what students are doing in writing. So even if reading and writing aren't taught right next to each other, we are still drawing skills. Hey, remember that work we did in reading when we noticed how the author used first person to write that story? Well, now in writing, we're going to try that same thing as we work on our personal narratives or fiction stories, whatever it may be. So there is a connection, even if the schedule doesn't align.
And it's funny because sometimes the kiddos will make those connections themselves, like without us. So that's a joyous moment when we don't even have to say it.
We have one question online. What are the healthiest ways to encourage reluctant readers or writers, or both?
Healthy. Healthiest way.
One of my favorite ways is to introduce students to a series of books. And for younger readers especially, it might start out as a parent or another adult reading out loud and sharing those stories together, finding a series where the student really connects with the subject or a character or the genre, and through that series kind of wants to read more and more, and then as the student grows, he or she can become a more independent reader. I think that's where that choice comes in a lot. I think also that modeling at home is great. You can have even a little mini book club at home where you, especially with an older child who can read independently, you and the older child could read the same book at the same time and have moments where you come together and talk about that book. So it creates kind of a special time for you, but also fosters that interest in reading.
I'd say as the mentor to them, also being humble with some of it and going, that word is really tough, or oh man, I'm struggling to remember what the the character or what they're feeling is in there, or even while writing, just be like, oh, I would love to write about that, but I don't know, what should I write, and try and get some question and answer going, just getting them thinking about it, but being humble to the process and not being like, you need to do this, and this has to be done this way. Right?
I agree. I think also with writing a little bit more, you can connect to what they like the most. I was thinking of it when you guys were talking about working at home, like what can parents do at home. If kiddos go on a field trip, or not a field trip, like a vacation or something with their family that they really enjoy, I often tell them to journal it or write about it, which at first they might, depending on the age, roll their eyes, be like, you're giving just me more homework. But they're able to connect with their feeling because they're experiencing it, what they liked or did not like about it. I saw them connect a lot in first grade when they did reviews. So they were reviewing restaurants and movies and products and things, and they were literally assigning like stars to them, like this is like a 4-star product, and it was one of my favorite things to see them write about because their opinions were so honest and true and really valid. So I think connecting to something that they're passionate about at home, I think will give them more confidence to write about whatever they're looking at or working on the most at school.
And those authentic reading experiences are important, that reading doesn't have to look a certain way. You might have a child who is more interested in reading nonfiction than fiction. Of course, we don't want them focusing only on nonfiction, but there's ways of getting that student involved in nonfiction by providing magazines. There's Scholastic Magazine and Time for Kids and other magazines that are out there that can allow students to read articles that they might be interested in. For older kids, they do have access to magazines about a certain subject. If a student's really into cars, sure, here, let's read this magazine together. We can find articles that you're interested in, and then hopefully then their skills start to grow and they can take those skills and apply them to other kinds of genres.
I don't think there's any other questions online. Any other questions from our audience member? All right. Well, we are going to end this Lunch and Learn. Thank you for everyone who joined online, and of course, this will be posted in a day or two onto the SSA website. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.